when the sun comes out, you really get some warmth, don't you? You need a bit of shelter too.
Yeah.
Get out the wind.
In the right place, Jim.
Hi there, guys. It is a bit cold, although it's bright.
It's cold enough. Cold
Yes,
wind.
yes. Hello and welcome to yet another saga in the Beechgrove story. And I've been trying to solve a problem here. People have a dilemma. I sowed some broad beans a week or two ago. Some on their side, some upside down, some on their flat, some on their end. Because everybody's got their favourite way of doing it. Which is the best? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which is
Doesn't
the best?
matter, does it?
It's the depth that's more important, isn't it?
Well,
rather than orientation.
Well, absolutely.
We did something like this with the daffodil bulbs, didn't we?
That's right.
Yeah. They've got to work a bit harder to get up, don't they? But that's the saga finished. We're not going to deal with that story again. Meanwhile, in the rest of the programme...
I'm here to see how one man has tamed his woodland wilderness.
And a recent allotment survey has proved that you can save a huge amount of money by growing your own delicious fruit and veg. So this week I'm starting vegetable gardening on a budget.
Well, a few minutes ago we were talking about how to sow broad beans.
Yes.
Now we're really down to the business itself. Actually, I'm planting and you're sowing in the same spot.
Yes, so we're going to get the succession, Jim,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
those were started off at the beginning of March, so we've got at least 6 weeks between them.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see if that's the same when
exactly.
they mature.
Now, what about varieties? I'm going to be planting here in front of me the Sutton, which has been for many years now our choice of variety because it's not too tall and it's a good
Right.
cropper.
It's quite an
reliable
old-fashioned
cropper.
variety, but
Then
it's a dwarf one.
We've got Robin Hood
Another dwarf one.
and Oscar.
Yeah, this
What's
is,
the story about Oscar?
That's a new one.
Yeah.
Probably slightly taller than the Sutton.
Yeah.
But the story there is when it matures,
Yeah.
hopefully it says that you should be able to crop all the pods at the same time, which is quite
So on a wet day
interesting.
you can just go and chop them off at the ground, take them inside and...
Should be able to, yes. And evidently you can eat them as like sort of mange too.
Yes, that's right. I noticed that.
Who wants to?
We want broad beans,
We
don't
want broad
we?
beans. It's time we
Now,
got them
the
planted.
other thing is I'm a little bit of an insurance policy because I'm direct sowing, so I'm putting 2 broad beans in at roughly the same space.
Oh, you
And pick the best
of
one.
little faith.
Well, we've got spare ones, so
Look
it
at the
should
lovely
be fine.
root system on that lot.
Fabulous, aren't
Eh?
they?
Absolutely
Absolutely
tremendous.
fabulous. Of course, they won't need staking just because they are so compact. And they're great, you know, for the decking in a container.
Yeah.
You've got a small garden.
That's very true. Love my broad beans, sir. Funnily enough, talking to somebody the other day, I love them with white sauce.
Oh, yes.
And someone said, ugh.
Well, you'll be able to try it later
That's what
on.
makes the world go round.
Spring is really epitomised by the energy with which plants burst out of the ground. And whilst as a gardener you look back and think, well, actually this bed is looking really rather fabulous with these sort of promising mounds of herbaceous perennials and grasses, you look at it with a different eye and think, can I propagate? And there are some that are well worth propagating right now. Now, this bed was originally perceived as a tapestry of herbaceous perennials. Some very early flowering, like our geraniums, but also quite late flowering, as in the case with this eryngium eburneum. The late flowering forms, like the eryngium here, are perfect for propagating now, precisely because they have all summer in which to put on extra root and extra shoots, and they'll still perform really well later on for a flowering session. And when you're lifting them out of the ground, it's best to fork around the base of the plant, simply because that will damage less of the root structure. And you can see it comes out really rather handsomely, and then you get a real sense of just how many potential plants there are here, at least 3 or 4 if you are greedy. Now, I'm not going to be quite that greedy because actually I'll probably just split it into 2, and the easiest way of doing that is to just make a rough assessment of where you can make a cut or a slice. And that's a pretty good spot straight through there. So with a sharp knife, you could do it with a spade if you wanted. It's just a bit more control on a knife. Just rock it through. And there we go. You can see just how thick that rhizomatous root is there. all of this fibrous root around the edge is, of course, absolutely key to the plant's survival, but this is what's providing the energy right now. It's this sort of inherent battery pack, if you like, of the plant. And that means that I've got one good section to go back in the garden here, and another one which I can move to somewhere else. And instead of just potting this straight in to soil or compost, something like that, what I want to try is to see just how effective the recent research on leaf mould is in getting plants to root effectively. This is our homemade leaf mould, so it really is just as dug. A couple of seasons of deciduous leaves rotted away in a chicken wire enclosure. And all of the research suggests that plants potted straight into pure leaf mould will survive, and in fact thrive, much better than just about any other growing medium. So we'll give this maybe just a season in the pot here, nurse it through, and then it'll be ready for planting back in the sunshine as a good, strong, healthy specimen.
These hellebores, they're gorgeous plants, but they can be fairly expensive. If you collect the seed, sow it straight away, look at all these seedlings that you can get. I always love a gardening bargain. Last year, you may remember that I concentrated on gardening on a budget. As part of that, we met Mari Reid, who lives and gardens in Ardersier. Mari's garden exemplifies how to garden on a tiny budget, but with huge style. Mari's garden, as you can see, is absolutely packed full of ornamental plants, that she has little space for growing her own fruit and veg to feed her young and hungry family. Now, a recent allotment survey has actually shown that you can save about £1,500 if you grow your own over buying them from the supermarket. So Mari and myself, we're going to see how much we can save by vegetable gardening on a budget. The problem is that, like many, Mari doesn't have an allotment or indeed space to grow vegetables. In an enterprising and clever community-spirited initiative, Mari is sharing land and gardens with neighbours and friends so that they can all benefit from the produce. Rosemary Sharp was finding her beautifully positioned but exposed garden a little too much for her. Mari stepped in and offered to garden and share.
Mari was coming to help me here in the garden sometimes, and one day last spring she noticed in this neglected bit of garden over here that I'd abandoned there was a potato plant coming up, and I'd been doing some work for some time with a Christian charity, and that was taking up more and more of my time, but it was the garden that was suffering. I couldn't do both. Mari said to me, how would it be if I grew potatoes in your garden, and then we could share the garden?
That was it.
What could possibly be better than that? Mari was going to do the work, and my husband and I were going to help eat it. So
fantastic.
What better?
Okay, so Mari, what did you actually grow last year?
Grew potatoes and beetroot, carrots, sprouting broccoli.
So what was the star of the show? Because, I mean, you can see straight away we're right by the water's edge. I mean, really exposed. You've got the salt problems. What did best?
I think beetroot was definitely a winner. It was fabulous, really nice. I tried some sprouting broccoli and that was really good.
I can still see that you've got some there.
I had about 7 plants. It was so much harvest of it.
Okay, so obviously we've got something planned for this year. Let's go and have a look. Well, it's great that we've got Callum giving us a hand as well.
That's very handy, yes.
Lots of couch grass here, isn't it?
I know, yes.
But you know, Mari, when you get here, you really do notice how exposed this site is.
Hence why I put this here. And last year I also had a hedge of flowers growing along here as well to protect.
So it's
a little
pretty
bit of it, yeah,
and productive,
yes.
But it filtered the wind.
It does a bit, yeah.
The leeks, I mean, although they're a little bit windburn, they've done okay.
Done okay, yeah.
So have you gradually extended the plot?
Yes, I did. Last year this bit was covered with the black polythene, and then in the spring I took it out up and put it on this bit here, and then by December it was ready to dig, so I dug this bit.
I mean, it's a great method of killing the weeds and no weed killer.
Yes.
Now, with the philosophy of we're gardening on a budget, you're using the seaweed, costing you nothing.
Nothing, just from over there. And
how long do you leave it on the top?
Just a couple of weeks, not even, depending on when I have time to dig it in.
It's a brilliant fertiliser because it's not only got the main nutrients, it's got the trace elements as well.
Fun.
You're also using your creative skills like you do in your own garden with the driftwood.
Yes, I did collect a little bit of driftwood and I thought I'll make a wee fence round and hopefully that will protect the plants a little bit from the...
Okay, well I think we should think about getting some of the plants in.
I think that would be really good to do, yes.
Mari, tell us a little bit about this garlic because it's rather special to you.
It is, yes. This garlic is coming from my mom in Romania. And it's a soft-neck garlic. It's a summer garlic and it's planted in the spring.
Yes, so it's a perfect time to plant. This isn't one that you put in in the winter.
This is a spring one. And I just use my fingers to space them.
And working on the board, so you've got a straight edge.
That's the idea. And also don't stand on the ground too much.
Potatoes are going in. Aaron's busy with that.
That's fantastic.
Callum's helping him.
Interested in doing a bit of gardening.
Yeah, start them young, start them young.
Yeah,
and I've brought a couple of plants for you as well. The oyster plant.
Yeah.
Have you ever grown that?
Nope.
First of all, you want to make sure it's really got good drainage.
Okay.
So you might even want to try that in amongst the stones. And you can use the leaves. I mean, they're quite succulent. They're meant to taste like oysters.
Okay, well.
Let's get the garlic in.
Garlic in.
A few miles inland from Ardasea, Mary Lindsay and young family would like to learn how to grow their own. Mari stepped in, and this time they have taken a piece of Mary's land and created a small productive garden. Now I know, Mary, that you're friends with Mari, but how did this come about?
I was very keen to grow vegetables somewhere, but was slightly concerned about the time that I had and also my knowledge about it.
So you've got this good relationship where you are going to share the veg between the families.
That's right.
But you're going to get the knowledge from Mari.
Yes, that's
how
right.
to grow them. What about the design?
I was quite keen to have something that was quite organised and contained.
Well, I like these raised beds because I think they're really good to work with. The fact you have got the rotation, but I think for yourself as a novice and for the children, the size of a plot, you know, if it's just one big bed, that can be quite daunting.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're dealing with one little bed like this, that's great. Your idea with the
We
cardboard?
put the cardboard board down to suppress the weeds, and then we put the horse manure, which is free, for the ponies.
A bit like the seaweed then, but
bet,
we've got horse manure.
We've got 2 ponies on site, and we're very lucky that we can use that manure, and then we barrow it all in.
Yeah, that's going to work for you.
Yeah, hopefully.
We should have a look at the kind of things that you're going to grow.
Yeah.
I think Mary and Mari are going to have a bumper crop of summer fruiting raspberries. All of these canes have come from Mari's garden in a very small space. Now they've got room. They were lifted in the dormant season. They're gross feeders, so there was lots of horse manure put underneath the ground to start off with. They've all been tied in and they're ready to go.
Yeah. Spotting it here and then.
Well, I tell you, this looks a very well prepared carrot bed.
I learned a couple of things from Mary. First of all, that we mustn't put manure in carrot beds. And also, we riddled all the soil to make sure it was very fine so that we could have straight carrots.
Long, straight carrots.
I knew carrots liked fine soil, but I didn't realise it was to make them straight.
Anything else that you're going to do, Mary?
We're going to water really well, and then we're going to cover it with black polythene to keep it warm and keep the moisture in. And we have to keep a close eye on them. And as soon as they start germinating, is lift the polythene up and cover them with fleece to keep the carrot fly out.
And there is a little bit of a budget because I want this site also to be pretty and productive and see if you can be a little bit creative. Maybe you're going to do a little bit of recycling and see what you come up with, and I'll be back in a couple of months' time.
Great, look forward to it. Yeah.
Well, despite it being the end of April, our osmanthus here is doing us proud, just about hanging on to flower. When you bear in mind this has been in flower right from winter through, well, it's nearly summer, isn't it? just about hanging on. The wisps of beautifully fragrant, sweet foliage still wafting across the garden. And it does demonstrate just how important having structural evergreens in a border is. It provides a skeleton, a building block, if you like, on a large scale or a smaller scale, like the ilex here, which is essentially doing exactly the same job, or the next step down, the olearia here. But these three do demonstrate one of the challenges of using evergreens, and that is they tend to grow relatively slowly. And they just suddenly, you look out of the window one morning and think it's occupying just an enormous amount of space, and it just becomes an amorphous blob. Just something which is in the way, really. Nothing demonstrates that principle more than our Mahonia down here. This is Mahonia media charity, typically planted around about a couple of feet high, and then within a few years it starts to become much more grand. And quite frankly, it really has become a bit of a thug, and pruning is really the only option. But before you get the saw out, just stand back and have a look, because you need to look at the structure and define, what can I do with this particular plant? What is going to be left and what am I aiming for? And then, if you get in and have a look at some of the stems, just look at that. Deeply fissured bark, wonderful craggy nature. It's got real personality and character. It would be such a shame to take out this central stem, which you could easily do here to rejuvenate from the base, but it means you would be missing out on all of this tree-like canopy. So I think what we need to do is probably start at the bottom and thin out, and then choose just how far we go with it. One of the things which is slightly unusual about pruning at this time of the year is that you can prune evergreens because they finish their principal flush of flowers. You can see the berries being formed here, and they've started their flush of growth, and that means the sap is rising, the plant is in action, and as a consequence it's safe to prune. If you prune this in autumn, then of course what you do is prune out all the flowers, you miss out on the berries, but also the plant tends to go into something of a downward spiral, into something of a sulk. So much better to wait until you see the first signs of growth. So the second step really, once you've got rid of all of the frass at the bottom, is to then strategically go through and take out anything which is dead or crossing a little bit further up. The third way of pruning it is to think about reducing the height, otherwise all your flowers will just go skyward and you'll never see them again. And in order to do that, if you take one of these stems which is going skyward, you can see immediately it's got a collection of these younger branches off of here, and then the main stem continues to go upwards. So if you can take out that top stem, you still end up with the potential for flower here, but it stops the plant being super vigorous and just going skyward. From a thuggish shrub to an elegant, if somewhat prickly, star performer, you get a sense of just how four-dimensional this plant is now. Look at the fissures in the bark, just beautiful. A bit of feed around this, it'd be perfect in winter.
Well, yeah, as you must know by now, I'm a bit of a creature of habit. And so when I go looking for seeds of salad turnips, I look for varieties like Snowball, which have been with us, for yonks. I was surprised last year when I started this project that there's a whole range of new ones that I've missed completely. So compared with Snowball, how, for example, will this wee cracker do? Tiny pal. It looks as if it's just ready to eat there, and we're looking for some other varieties that surprise us. And we're sowing them in a double row of each variety with a slight gap in between. And we will see in due time just how good these new ones compare with the old Snowball. They will be covered with fleece because, as you know, we've got some flipping rabbits about the place, and they will just make mischief of these wee neeps as they come through the ground, so we'll protect them.
Today I'm in East Lothian, near the village of Humby, 600 foot above sea level, just at the bottom of the Lammermuir Hills. Now this is a landscape which inspired Sir Walter Scott to write his novel on that ill-fated Jacobite love affair, The Bride of Lammermuir. But I'm not here to talk about literature, I'm here to visit a garden. Well, one man's romantic novel is another man's sheer graft against the elements and the landscape. It's the story of Frank Kirwan's single-handed battle to tame his little bit of wilderness. You came here 8 years ago, Frank. What was it like then?
It was dominated by a line of Leylandii, about 25 to 30 feet tall, which ran from the very mature ash there to the far corner of the house. And they blocked out all light, and beyond them, I had no idea there was wilderness, but I knew I'd bought 2 acres.
Didn't know what?
No, didn't know what. I inherited some mature rhododendrons, such as the ones behind us, and some fine mature shrubs, but there wasn't a garden to speak of. But the beech wasn't here, the birch wasn't here, the views weren't here.
Right. Because this view now is just fantastic. This is right out onto the Lammermuir Hills and this wonderful rural landscape which we've got.
And we revealed it with some regret last autumn because there were 2 very fine Cryptomeria japonica just sitting up here. Right. So they came out last autumn and they are now the mulch on the herbaceous border there.
Great conservation move, isn't it?
It's also done to reduce the amount of time I spend weeding, which I consider the greatest waste of time in the garden.
There are some super things here. I mean, look at that. That's just the ordinary flowering currant, but so valuable at this time of the year, isn't it?
Yes, completely unpretentious.
Yeah, yeah. Now, that's sticking out like a Belisha beacon, isn't it? What's that?
It is. That is Rhododendron barbatum, one of the rhododendrons we put in probably 2009. There are 3 of them there. It provides a wonderful splash of colour seen from the road in spring.
Watch, you've got a barrier up here. What's this?
I have a barrier because this is a wild orchid. Dactyloriza.
That's the
Dactyloriza.
one. That's it. Right.
They grow in the wood mulch and they are absolutely beautiful.
Spontaneous eruption.
Indeed,
right?
indeed.
Now this was the line of stumps, wasn't it, from the leyland?
This was the line of the Leylandii, and the initial edges of the paths are formed of the bits of Leylandii which were too big to shred and which I had run out of energy to actually saw up. And the first covering on the paths was the shredded foliage and smaller branches of the Leylandii. And then the network of paths simply evolved from there.
It's quite steep, Frank.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is.
Yeah. Now, what was this like before?
It was a mass of mature and semi-mature trees, and I've taken some out, the great landscaper in the sky has taken some out, and what's left is wild raspberry, wild cherry, and so on.
Okay. So this is what happens once you take stuff out. You get 1 or 2 of these suckers coming up and seedlings coming up, and that's phase 1.
That's phase 1.
That's phase 1. And then this is phase 2. So what are the favourite plants for in here?
Well, the things that are doing well in here are things like the Begonia, different types of Begonia, the hellebores, the Geranium macarizum, the Aquilegia, some of the simple ferns, the Matiucas. That's it. It's a limited palette. What works ends up being repeated.
Which is good though, because if it does work, why change it? This is really something else, because normally when we look at hellebores, they're looking down. I mean, they're all drooping their heads. There they are, further up the hill.
The thinking was that if you saw them as you came up steps or saw them from below on a slope, you would appreciate them in a way you wouldn't otherwise.
This is the, what, creme de la creme.
This is Erythronium pagoda. Dirt cheap bought them £8 a hundred.
Right.
You just stick them in.
Right.
And as long as you get them the key thing is get them when they're fresh. You have to plant them almost immediately. If you haven't got them in by the end of August, I find they don't take. They just, they're...
So it's all about fresh.
It is.
Really
it is with them.
These are superb.
And those are in probably 3-4 years. They bulk up very, very quickly here.
You are so lucky. We're right down at the bottom of the garden now, Frank. This is where 2 streams meet.
The property is shaped almost like a wedge of French cheese, a wedge of brie, and we're down at the very bottom where it's dribbling away into 2 streams.
So that Brunnera is just, I mean, look how vibrant that blue is.
It meets my criteria of providing interest and smothering the weeds.
Yeah. And then Mrs. Rob's bonnet, this Euphorbia robier with this wonderful lime green flower, that is just superb. And that's thriving.
And it looks good because I've taken out all last year's dead stalks.
That's the trick, that's the trick. But everywhere we look, there's you know, bundles of this and bundles of that. There's more erythroniums up there. Look at that little white one.
Yes, this is Erythronium White Beauty, and again it bulks up pretty quickly and is pretty cheap.
You're all into this cheap stuff, aren't you?
I am, because I can't afford to do it otherwise.
Yeah, right. But it is important, isn't it?
It is. I
Bulk up. Get
need
them in.
large numbers to make an
Yeah.
impact, otherwise things disappear without trace. And this is the meadow.
This is just fantastic.
Well, I wish I could claim credit for it, but most of these daffodils were here before I came. I've added maybe 1,000 more. There are what, 5,000, 10,000?
Yeah, easily. Hosts of golden daffodils.
Absolutely.
Now, this is looking down onto the meeting of the rivers, as it were. That is just a fabulous view all the way through there. But you know, are you looking for anything to do?
Well, the remaining project is the far corner.
Right, well, there is an archway made by a half-fallen tree down there, and when you look through underneath it, it frames a view, but there's nothing at the end. You know these rhododendron barbatum you've got back there? I think if you took one of those and planted it, put it in the back there, and your eye will be drawn right down the river, down to that there. What a wonderful ending.
It's anathema to plant just one, but maybe two or three. It's the odd clump of daffodil, the odd white hellebore. Why stick with just one? We're into scale here.
Yeah.
I guess there'll be many of you out there like me who have one or two shrubs or conifers in big pots. It's at particular parts of the garden, just beside a door, beside a gate or whatever. I find them very attractive. And sometimes they get forgotten when it comes to feeding. Just like this fella, Griselinia littoralis. Gorgeous plant, makes a great hedge by the seaside, by the way. But it's gone a bit pale. It's got its tongue hanging out. It's needing fed. So I'm putting in a mixture of bloodfish and bone, mixed with some old compost, giving it a top dressing. And you can see from the shape of these things, sometimes they cast the rain. So after I've got this finished, it'll be getting a real good soak.
Isn't this a great plant? It's Pulsatilla vulgaris rubra, or the common name is the puff flower. Not only is the flower gorgeous, but also the foliage, lots of hair on there, and it produces these fluffy seed heads. And if you want to propagate it, remember to sow the seed fresh.
Earlier in the programme, I was talking about the benefits of pruning evergreens at this time of the year when they're in full growth. But, as ever, there are some exceptions, and our Pyrrhus here is demonstrating exactly why there is an exception. This last week was looking fabulous with fresh shoots. Now it's been frosted, and that means you would never carry out any pruning until the plant has corrected itself. All of these will fall away, you'll get fresh shoots, and only then think about pruning.
I tell you what, as you go around the garden, we're constantly reminded that this is still spring and plants can still be damaged with frost. Look at that poor old rhodie there. I mean,
Such a shame, isn't it? Such
and
a
we've
shame.
waited all winter to see these buds burst out.
And you can't cover everything, can you? That's the thing.
Well,
You can't sheet over everything.
No, absolutely right, that's true.
Anyway, on a positive note, if you want any more information about this week's programme, it's all in the fact sheet, and the easiest way to access that is online. What are you doing next week, Chris?
Next week, I'm, well, attempting to come up smelling of roses.
Nice.
We'll see how that goes.
Ooh.
And Jim?
I'm not fancying my chances outside. I'm going to be in a glass house somewhere. Until next time.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.